I never thought the day I quit my own family would be Christmas Eve. My daughter-in-law was spitting venom at me, but I didn't care. I already knew the truth about her $50,000 secret and the fate of my house. If you have ever been treated like a servant in your own home, press 1 inch. The comments, now. If you hate injustice, hit the like button and tell me where you're listening from. If you don't like my story, still hit like and comment 0. She called me mom, but I was nothing more than her free labor. It took a $50,000 secret to finally break me. I remember my kitchen in Naperville, Illinois, in a strange, hyper-realistic way, that December Tuesday. It was a cozy space, the heart of the home I'd built over 30 years with my late husband. Now it felt like a cold, brightly lit stage for my daily humiliation. I stood by the granite countertop, wiping down the already spotless surface. I was doing what I always did, performing the duties of a servant in the house where I was supposed to be the matriarch. For 5 years, ever since my son Kevin married Tiffany, I had slipped into the role of the invisible house cleaner, cook, and personal assistant. This wasn't retirement, it was servitude. I used to cling to the illusion that this obedience was the price of keeping my family together. I believed that if I was useful, they would value me. I told myself it was love, a mother's sacrifice. But the truth, the bitter, jagged pill, was that I had become a utility, a resource to be exploited, like the old, worn-out refrigerator they expected to always be stocked. Just last week, I'd overheard Tiffany on the phone with one of her friends. "Oh, Margaret, she's a lifesaver, doesn't charge a dime, and she keeps this place immaculate. Honestly, I thought old ladies were supposed to be a burden, but she's the best perk of this marriage." The memory was a sharp needle. It wasn't the first time I'd been reduced to a perk or a lifesaver who simply didn't charge a dime. As I wiped the counter, my fingers brushed against the cool metal surface of an old tin box tucked discreetly under a ceramic fruit bowl. That box held the deed to this house, the house Tiffany saw only as a stepping stone. A feeling of dread, cold, and deep settled in my stomach. I knew with a certainty that defied logic that this house was the core of her true ambition. This was the moment I should have called Kevin and demanded boundaries, but the courage wasn't there yet. The courage needed a catalyst. The catalyst arrived shortly after 10 a.m. Tiffany didn't knock. She never did. She swept into the kitchen with the dramatic entrance of a spoiled Hollywood starlet, her fake smile glued to a face that radiated triumphant smugness. She wore a ridiculously expensive cherry red wool coat, undoubtedly funded by Kevin's paycheck, or worse, my future. The click of her stilettos against my ceramic tile floor sounded exactly like little hammers hitting the last nerve in my head. "Margaret?" She purred, using that patronizing tone she saved exclusively for me. "I have marvelous news." I paused my cleaning, a small, quiet act of resistance. The silence was instantly unnerving to her. Tiffany was used to an immediate, subservient response. "Yes, Tiffany." I managed my voice steady, surprising even myself. She perched on one of the antique stools my husband had refinished, crossing her long, elegant legs. "My entire family is coming to spend Christmas here. Isn't that just perfect?" I felt the blood drain from my face. My mind instantly began calculating beds, linens, meals, seating arrangements. "Your entire family?" I asked. "Oh, it's nothing major," she dismissed, with a wave of a perfectly manicured hand. "It's only 25 people. Only 25 people." As if that were a small, manageable number for a woman pushing 70. As if my life were dedicated solely to providing catering services for her extended, ungrateful clan. The malicious glint in her eyes told me everything. This wasn't an oversight. It was a deliberate, calculated demand to assert dominance and workload. Tiffany launched into her master plan, detailing the guest list as if reading from a grocery list. My sister Valeria, my cousin Evelyn, my brother-in-law Marco, my uncle Alejandro. Everyone is coming. My nieces and nephews will be here. It's going to be a perfect Christmas. She took a dramatic pause, waiting for my usual panicked, "Oh my, how will I manage" reaction. Instead, I simply waited. Of course, she continued, her voice dripping with condescension. You'll handle everything. The food, the cleaning, serving the tables. You know how I hate the smell of turkey grease. Her words landed like slaps. I remembered the years, all 5 of them I had prepared dinners for her friends, while she took the credit, telling everyone she had cooked the perfect meal. All the times I had cleaned up after her late-night parties while she slept until noon. All the times I had been made invisible, in the very home I paid for. We'll need 3 turkeys at least, she pressed, ignoring my silence, and that chocolate silk pie you make. Oh, and you'll have to decorate the entire house. I want it to look perfect for the Instagram photos. The Instagram photos, I echoed flatly. My sacrifice, my labor, reduced to a backdrop for her social media validation. That was the absolute limit. Something inside me, cold and hard, finally fractured. I had been a fool clinging to a broken promise of familial love. I had believed being useful would earn me a place, but it had only cemented my role as a shadow. I slowly placed the wiping cloth back on the counter. The action was deliberate, a silent curtain call on my performance as the docile matriarch. I looked her directly in the eye, with a calm that stunned both of us. Her smile began to falter, sensing the shift in the air. Perfect, I repeated, mirroring her earlier word. It will be a perfect Christmas for you all, because I won't be here. The silence that followed was suffocating. Tiffany blinked, her mouth slightly ajar. Her perfect poised composure began to crumble, giving way to shock and disbelief. This was the moment of rupture, the final severance of the chain of servitude. What do you mean you won't be here? She finally managed to articulate, her voice, trembling, the entitlement suddenly stripped away. Exactly what you heard. I replied the truth, feeling like pure, clean oxygen in my lungs. I'm going on vacation. You all can cook, clean, and serve yourselves. I am not your maid. I am not your employee. The color drained completely from her face. I had done it. I had quit. The clock ticked loudly. She was speechless for the first time in 5 years. But Margaret, she finally stammered. I already told everyone to come. It's all planned. You can't do this. Of course I can, I said, a slow, dangerous smile touching my lips. It's my house. Those 4 words, it's my house, landed like a grenade. Tiffany shot up from the stool, her heels clicking desperately. Kevin is not going to allow this, she shrieked. Kevin can have whatever opinion he likes, I replied, maintaining my serene calm. But the decision has been made. I am leaving. The silence was deafening, but this time, the perfect little servant was not broken. She was calculating. I looked her dead in the eye, and for the first time in 5 years, I let her perfect smile falter with 2 calm, cold words. I won't be here. You all can cook and clean. I am not your maid. Tiffany's face, usually so composed and calculated, was now a portrait of pure panic. Her perfect manicured hands, which rarely touched anything but a credit card reader, began to tremble. She managed to articulate her next sentence, but the confidence was gone. But Margaret, I already told everyone to come. It's all planned. You can't do this. Of course I can, I repeated, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. It's my house. The kitchen air was thick with tension, heavier than any holiday glaze I had ever cooked. She lunged for the door, her heels clattering desperately. Kevin is not going to allow this, she shrieked. It was an immediate call to authority, a desperate attempt to restore the power dynamic she had relied on for 5 years. She viewed Kevin as the judge, and me as the errant subordinate who needed to be disciplined. I watched her go, a sudden cold sense of clarity washing over me. This was no longer about a few days of cooking. This was about respect, the one currency I had never been paid, the one thing I had craved since my husband passed away, and I had felt my significance begin to fade. I recalled the day Kevin and Tiffany moved in shortly after their wedding. I thought I was offering sanctuary. They saw an opportunity. My husband and I had lived modestly in this 3-bedroom ranch in Naperville, working hard, saving meticulously. I was a retired accountant. I knew the value of $1, and more importantly, the cost of sacrifice. Now Kevin was home. I heard his weary sigh as he walked in his suit, wrinkled from a long day at his brokerage firm downtown. Tiffany rushed him a dramatic tornado of fabric and panic, twisting the story immediately. I heard her muffled, frantic voice. "Kevin, your mother has gone insane. She's ruining Christmas." When he finally appeared in the kitchen doorway, he looked tired, annoyed, and most offensively patronizing. He ran a hand through his hair, the classic gesture of a man dealing with a hysterical woman. "Mom." He began using that tone he reserved for dealing with minor household crises. "Tiffany told me about your decision. Don't you think you're being a little dramatic?" Dramatic. My own son calling me dramatic for refusing to be his wife's unpaid labor. The word landed on my wounded pride like a handful of gravel. The hurt was physical, sharp, and it solidified the cold resolve I had found moments earlier. The mother I used to be, the one who would have apologized and cooked 5 turkeys to keep the peace, was officially dead. "No, Kevin," I replied, my voice dangerously even. "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being clear. This is about respect. And for 5 years, neither you nor your wife has shown me any." He immediately resorted to emotional manipulation. "But Mom, it's Christmas. Tiffany already invited everyone. We can't cancel now." This was the core of the problem. Their convenience always trumped my dignity. Tiffany stepped forward, placing herself between us like a barrier, reinforcing their unified front. "What will my family think? I can't cook for 25 people by myself." "Then hire a caterer," I suggested, with a sweet, almost predatory smile. "There are many excellent options in the city." Kevin jumped in, horrified. "Catering costs a fortune. Why spend thousands of dollars?" My daughter-in-law thought she had planned a perfect trap. I simply showed her family where I had buried the truth. I took a deep, steadying breath, the air in the dark kitchen feeling charged with the knowledge of Tiffany's ultimate deceit. That night, after they finally retreated upstairs, their voices muffled, still arguing in desperate whispers about how to salvage their fraudulent Christmas, I locked myself in my bedroom. This was no longer about hurt feelings or wounded pride. It was about survival and the protection of the legacy my late husband and I had built. I pulled out my laptop, the screen illuminating the quiet, familiar space. My original plan to simply leave for Miami was a necessary lie, a smokescreen. My real destination was a secluded luxury suite barely an hour away, booked under my maiden name. But before that, I had one final, crucial piece of work to do. I opened my email. I had carefully drafted a message to 2 very specific people on Tiffany's enormous guest list: her uncle Alejandro, the successful businessman from Miami, and her sister Valeria, who worked in finance and had an impeccable reputation. I composed the email with the utmost care, adopting the persona of a concerned, slightly confused mother-in-law. I expressed my worry over the young couple's delicate financial situation and humbly asked for their advice on how to help Kevin manage his finances. Of course, the real punch was in the attachment. I had accidentally attached some of the most alarming bank statements I had found, the ones detailing Tiffany's compulsive unearned spending and her secret credit card debts exceeding $50,000. The lie came so naturally it surprised even me. But it was essential. They couldn't know my real plan. Not yet. The responses were immediate and exactly what I had calculated. Alejandro was furious at being deceived about Tiffany's real situation. Valeria was so angry she threatened to come personally to sort out her younger sister's life. They were the pillars of her family's wealth and reputation, and she had used their generosity and good name as collateral for her lies. The best response came from Alejandro. He informed me that he and his family had decided to arrive a day early, the morning of the 23rd, to have an important conversation with Tiffany before the celebration. The morning of the 23rd. Exactly when I had scheduled my taxi. What a perfect coincidence. I replied quickly, confirming that I would be gone, and that Tiffany and Kevin would be their hosts. That was the final piece of the strategic puzzle. The seeds of doubt had been planted in Tiffany's source of financial hope, and they were about to arrive at her doorstep, not as guests but as auditors. At 6:00 inches the morning, my alarms sang like the anthem of freedom. I got up with an energy I hadn't felt in years. I showered peacefully and began to pack my bags. Every garment I folded was another step toward my independence. I was putting on my new life one suitcase at a time. Tiffany and Kevin were still asleep, oblivious to the fact that their perfectly engineered holiday was about to become a logistical and financial nightmare. I carried my suitcases down the stairs, carefully avoiding the creaky third step. I had prepared a note which I left on the kitchen table next to the spare house keys. Have decided to leave early for my trip. The house is in your hands. Enjoy your perfect Christmas, Margaret. The note was brief, but the message it delivered was immense. What the note didn't mention was the series of deliberate silent actions I had taken before leaving, turning my retreat into an act of calculated sabotage. First, I had quietly and completely emptied the pantry and the refrigerator. After all, if they were going to host 25 people, they needed to learn to be responsible for buying food. Food, I reflected, doesn't magically appear in refrigerators. It was a realization that would hit them like a physical blow. Second, I had locked away all my good china, my elegant tablecloths, and my cherished Christmas decorations. If they wanted to impress the rich family, they would have to get their own supplies. The table would be set with whatever mismatched plastic-handled cutlery they owned. No more riding on the coattails of my good taste and hospitality. The final, sweetest touch was canceling the cleaning service that came twice a week, a service I paid for, but for which Tiffany always took the credit for having a perfectly kept house. Starting today, she could experience what it really meant to keep a house clean on her own. I stepped out onto the porch. The quiet morning air was crisp and cold. My taxi arrived promptly at 7 a.m. As the driver loaded my bags, I glanced back at the house, my sanctuary turned prison, which would now become my fortress again. I was leaving temporarily, but I was reclaiming it completely. The hotel where I checked in was everything I had dreamed of during my years of forced domestic service. A spacious suite with an ocean view, 24-hour room service, and most importantly, absolute silence. No one shouting for coffee. No one expecting me to appear with a perfectly prepared meal. No one assuming my time had no value. My phone started ringing at 10:47 inches the morning. Kevin, of course. His voice sounded confused, still sleepy, undoubtedly having just discovered the empty pantry and the lack of weekend breakfast. "Mom, where are you? We found your note, but why did you leave early?" "Good morning, Kevin," I replied calmly. "You two have a lot to do to prepare, and I am very much looking forward to some rest." I hung up, putting my phone on silent. I ordered lobster thermidor from room service, something I would never have cooked for myself because it would have seemed too extravagant by the standards of austerity Tiffany had imposed in my own home. At 1:00 p.m., I checked my messages. There were 17 missed calls from Kevin, 31 from Tiffany, and an avalanche of texts escalating from confusion to pleading to outrage. But the message I was truly waiting for had arrived from Alejandro. "My family and I will arrive tomorrow at 8:00 inches the morning as agreed. We look forward to meeting you personally and having that important conversation with Tiffany." Perfect. They would arrive at the peak of Tiffany and Kevin's panic. At 3:00 p.m., my hotel room phone rang. It was the front desk. "Ma'am, a Mr. Alejandro is calling. He says it's urgent." I took the call. "Mrs. Margaret, we arrived at the airport early and decided to come straight to your house. We expect to be there in 15 minutes. Too early." I had to maintain the charade. "I regret to inform you that I had to move up my trip due to unexpected family commitments. Tiffany and Kevin will be delighted to host you. I'm sure you will have much to talk about." His response was immediate. "I understand perfectly. In fact, this might be for the best. Some conversations are better in private." A private conversation between a woman who had been living on lies for years and a family that finally knew the truth about her financial deceptions. I smiled. Justice, even when late, always arrives. I took a sip of my champagne, and at 1:47 a.m., my phone rang. It was Kevin, and his voice was trembling. "Tiffany's family has arrived, Mom, and we have absolutely nothing to offer them." Outrage from the first seconds. If you liked this video, please comment 1, or like, or comment where you're from. If you didn't like it, please like this video And comment 0. I felt the peace of 1,000 oceans. While I enjoyed my eggs Benedict, my phone exploded with messages. The collapse of Tiffany's perfectly manufactured world had begun. The morning of December 23rd dawned cold and bright over the Gulf Coast, a stark contrast to the emotional blizzard raging back in Naperville. I sat on my suite's terrace, the scent of salt and freedom, replacing the stale aroma of resentment I had lived with for 5 years. I was not in Miami as I had lied, but the serenity was real. While I savored my smoked salmon eggs Benedict, a dish far too extravagant for the modest life Tiffany had forced upon me, my phone, still on silent, blinked constantly with desperate notifications. Site 3109. The anticipation was almost more satisfying than the actual event. I knew, based on the frantic texts from Kevin, that Tiffany was hysterical. He was likely dealing with the shock of the empty pantry, the locked china cabinet, and the sudden realization that their perfectly planned manipulation required actual effort and money. Site 3242. I decided to check the voicemails at my leisure. The first was from Kevin, his voice shaking with a confusion that was almost pitiable. "Mom, please pick up. Tiffany is hysterical. We don't know what to make for breakfast for 25 people. The family arrives at exactly 8, and we need help urgently. Please call us." Site 3130. The next message was from Tiffany, her perfectly coiffed composure finally shattered. She was sobbing a broken, ugly sound. "Margaret, I know you're mad at me, and I get why, but please don't make me look bad in front of my family. They traveled so far. I don't know how to cook for this many people. I don't even know where to start. Please just help me." Site 3155. The messages continued escalating from pleading to utter breakdown. But the one that brought a genuine cold smile to my face was the last one, also from Tiffany, now laced with genuine panic. "Margaret, I just checked the pantry and the refrigerator. Everything is empty. Why is there nothing? Where is the good china? Where are the Christmas tablecloths? Please at least just tell me where you put everything. Just that, please." Site 32153242. Ah yes. The tardy understanding that running a household requires planning, effort, and actual money, not just a 70-year-old woman's invisible labor. Then the final crucial message arrived at 7:15 a.m. Not from Kevin, but from a deeper, authoritative voice I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Margaret, this is Alejandro. We arrived at the airport early and decided to come straight to your house. We expect to be there in 15 minutes. I'm very much looking forward to meeting you and having that conversation we've been planning." Site 3308. Perfect. They would arrive at the peak of Tiffany and Kevin's panic, facing the combined disaster of the logistical failure and the financial truth I had mailed them. At 8:20 a.m., my phone rang. This time I answered. "Mom." Kevin's voice was trembling on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "Good morning, Kevin. How is your morning going?" I asked, my tone light, almost cheerful. "Mom, please don't do this. Tiffany's family just arrived and we have nothing to offer them. Literally nothing. Tiffany is crying in the bathroom and I don't know what to do." Site 3334. "Have you explained the situation to them?" I asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. "What situation? How do I explain that my mother decided to go on vacation right when we needed her most?" Site 3358. When they needed me most. Not when I needed respect or understanding or a simple thank you for 5 years of service. Only when they needed my utility. "Tell them the truth," Kevin, I instructed calmly. "That for 5 years you took it for granted that I would be your unpaid domestic servant, and that I finally decided I deserved a vacation." There was a long pause filled with background noise, a mixture of confusion and panic. I could hear someone speaking sternly, undoubtedly Alejandro demanding an explanation. Kevin's voice returned small and desperate. "At least can you tell us where you always bought the food? What you used to make for special occasions? Anything to help?" Site 3418. "Kevin," I replied, my voice Sharpening, I didn't always buy anything. I planned for weeks in advance. I researched recipes, made detailed lists, compared prices, and dedicated entire days to preparation. It wasn't magic. It was work. A lot of work. Site 3438. The silence told me he was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of the effort he had ignored. Look, he continued, pleading. I know we've been inconsiderate, but right now I need practical solutions. What do I do with 25 hungry people in my living room? Site 3503. Order takeout, I suggested. Call restaurants. Go to the supermarket. Do what all responsible adults do when they have guests. But it's the holidays, everything is closed or swamped. Then maybe you should have thought of that before you invited 25 people without consulting the person you expected to do all the work. Site 3523. A new voice cut through the line, heavy with authority. Young man, I need to understand what kind of family gathering you organize. Where is the woman of the house? Where is the grandmother who invited them? Site 3629. Mom, Tiffany's uncle wants to talk to you. He says he needs to understand what's going on, Kevin pleaded. I would love to talk to him, but I'm on vacation, I replied sweetly. Tell him Tiffany can explain everything perfectly. After all, she's the one who organized this gathering. Site 3542. Please, Mom. Just 5 minutes. I think he can help us solve this. Help us. It was still about helping them. It was never about what I needed or what I deserved. Kevin listened to me very carefully. I said my final words, firm and definitive. For 5 years, every time you needed something, I was there. Every time Tiffany wanted to impress someone, I did the work. Every time you had problems, I was the solution. Today, for the first time in half a decade, you have to solve your own problems. And that is not my responsibility. Site 3606. I hung up, shutting the phone off completely. The confrontation was over. The battle for my dignity was won. Now the final act of justice, the collapse of Tiffany's financial kingdom, was beginning. I ordered room service and allowed myself a moment of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. I was free, and Tiffany was finally facing the consequences of her years of deceit. The war was over, but the terms of surrender had yet to be delivered. I called my lawyer, Robert. It was time my family learned the true meaning of gratitude. The day was December 24th, Christmas Eve. I packed my bags calmly, the serenity of my luxury suite giving me the final strength I needed. The phone remained off. I knew the silence at the house was deafening, amplified by the presence of Tiffany's extended family, who were now fully aware that their perfect host was in fact a calculated fraud. Before leaving the hotel, I made the one call that mattered. Robert, I'm Margaret. Are all the documents we discussed ready? Robert Miller, my attorney, had been a family friend for decades, a meticulous man who understood both legal minutiae and emotional stakes. Perfectly ready, Margaret, he confirmed. The changes to the will are notarized. The amendment to the house deed is registered, and the new residency agreements are ready for your signature. Are you sure you want to do this on Christmas Eve? Robert, I replied, my voice stealing there is no more perfect time. It's time my family learned the true meaning of gratitude. The drive back to Naperville was quiet. I wore a new tailored wool coat, not the dowdy cardigan I usually retreated into, but one that projected quiet authority. I was no longer the servant. I was the matriarch reclaiming her domain. The taxi dropped me off promptly, at 10 in the morning. I opened the door with my own key, and the entire house fell silent. The air was thick, with the scent of unwashed dishes and stale pizza. The pitiful attempt to feed 25 people. Margaret. Kevin's voice was the first sound, incredulous, almost hopeful, as if my return meant the crisis was magically over. Yes, I'm back, I confirmed. He appeared first, looking utterly defeated. He hadn't shaved, and the dark circles under his eyes spoke of a sleepless, chaotic night. He was finally confronting the consequences of his willful blindness. Behind him came Tiffany, a version of my daughter-in-law. I had never seen. No makeup, wrinkled clothes, eyes swollen from crying. The mask of perfection had dissolved. Then came the others, her family gathered awkwardly in my living room. Alejandro stern and imposing. Valeria holding a heavy folder of documents. Marco, the real estate agent, his face etched with professional disappointment. Alejandro, ever, the dignified businessman, stepped forward. "Mrs. Margaret," he said, extending a hand respectfully. "It is an honor to finally meet you. We are deeply sorry to have met under these circumstances." "The honor is mine, Alejandro," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "And don't worry, sometimes the truth needs to come out dramatically." Just then, the doorbell rang, the precise timing I had arranged. It was Robert Miller, my attorney. His entrance with a neat leather briefcase immediately added an unmistakable weight of legality and finality to the atmosphere. "Robert, thank you for coming," I said. "I believe we're all ready for the conversation we've been postponing for years." Robert nodded professionally. "Good morning. I am Robert Miller, Mrs. Margaret's attorney. I understand there are some family and financial matters that require clarification." Tiffany grew even paler, sinking onto the sofa. "Why is there a lawyer here?" she managed to whisper. The moment had arrived. 5 years of humiliation, manipulation, and silence crystallized into my response. Because after 5 years of emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and a total lack of respect, I have decided I need legal protection. I replied, my voice icy calm. Kevin, genuinely confused, took a step forward. "Legal protection from what, Mom?" I looked directly at Tiffany, then back at my son, making sure he understood every brutal word. "From your wife's attempts to use my future death as collateral for loans, from her plans to convince you to sell my house to pay off her compulsive shopping debts, from her unauthorized use of your credit information." Need I continue? The silence was absolute. Tiffany was slumped on the sofa, finally understanding her world of lies had completely collapsed. Kevin looked utterly shocked, but beneath the shock, a wave of profound shame was visible. Robert I instructed, "Shall we proceed?" The lawyer opened his briefcase, the soft click of the latch sounding like the gavel of judgment. "Very well. First, the will changes. Mrs. Margaret has amended her will to ensure that the ownership of this house can never be sold or mortgaged without her explicit consent, even after her death." He stated this with the cold authority of the law. "The house will be transferred into a family trust that protects Kevin's interests, but explicitly prohibits any financial speculation." Tiffany began to weep silently, her breath ragged. Kevin looked down at the floor, finally seeing the monstrous ambition he had shielded for half a decade. "Second," Robert continued, "the new terms of residency. Tiffany no longer has unrestricted access rights to this property. Any visit must be coordinated in advance and approved by Mrs. Margaret." "What does that mean exactly?" Kevin asked, his voice trembling. "It means," I intervened, staring directly at Tiffany, "your wife can no longer walk into my house whenever she pleases, give orders about my food and my time, or assume I will be her domestic servant." "You never noticed, Kevin. In 5 years you never wondered why your wife never cooked or cleaned, but always talked about what a perfect hostess she was. You never noticed that every time you had guests, I did all the work while she took the client. Credit." Kevin bowed his head, finally confronting years of willful blindness. He had allowed his mother to be a victim, not out of malice, but out of sheer convenience. Alejandro stepped toward Tiffany, his voice heavy with paternal disappointment. "Tiffany, our family gave you opportunities, trust, and support based on lies. You made us unwitting accomplices in your disrespect toward a woman who deserved our admiration, not our contempt. I had won. The legal framework was set. The authority was restored." "Very well," Robert said, closing his briefcase. "First, the will changes. Mrs. Margaret has amended her will to ensure that the ownership of this house can never be sold or mortgaged. She has also stated that Tiffany no longer has unrestricted access to this property. Any visit must be coordinated in advance. Comment, power, reversal. Below, if you think Margaret's plan is perfect." My son bowed his head, finally confronting 5 years of willful blindness. For the first time, my house truly felt like home again. Kevin's head remained bowed, his face buried in his hands. The silence that followed the lawyer's pronouncement was thick, but it was no longer the oppressive silence of subservience. It was the heavy silence of consequences. For the first time, I saw my son not as an accomplice to Tiffany's abuse, but as a man who had finally been forced to confront his own profound failure to see, to care, and to protect. Alejandro, his face carved with disappointment, approached Tiffany, who was huddled on the sofa, her silent sobs shaking her entire body. "Tiffany," he said, his voice quiet, but devastatingly firm. "Our family gave you opportunities, trust, and support based on lies. You made us unwitting accomplices in your disrespect toward a woman who deserved our admiration, not our contempt." She managed a ragged whisper. "Uncle, I never wanted to." "You never wanted what, Tiffany?" I interjected, my voice cutting through the room with the finality of a judge's verdict. "To lie about your income, to commit identity fraud, to promise inheritances that weren't yours to give, to treat your mother-in-law like a servant." She had no answer. Her elaborate facade, maintained for years, had vanished, leaving behind only a vulnerable, broken girl facing an insurmountable debt of lies. "There is one more thing," I continued, turning my full attention to my son and daughter-in-law. "You will pay back every penny you borrowed using lies about my supposed inheritance. You will personally apologize to every family member you deceived. And you will learn to live within your actual means, not in the fantasy you built at my expense." Valeria, ever the finance professional, stepped forward with her folder. "And if she doesn't, then she will face the appropriate legal consequences for identity fraud and fraudulent obtainment of credit." Robert finished closing his briefcase with a sharp snap. The sound was a final punctuation mark on Tiffany's disastrous reign. I addressed the entire group gathered in my living room, the people who had witnessed my 5-year ordeal and my final quiet rebellion. For 5 years I sacrificed my dignity because I thought I was keeping the family together. But I learned something important. A family built on disrespect and manipulation is not a family at all. It is a toxic structure that hurts everyone involved. I focused my gaze on Kevin, the heartbreak finally giving way to a fierce, protective love for the boy he once was. "Son, I love you, but you have to decide what kind of man you want to be. One who allows his wife to abuse his mother, or one who defends respect and honesty in his family." And finally to Tiffany. "And you have to decide if you want to be a responsible adult who faces the consequences of her actions, or continue to be a manipulative child who expects others to solve the problems she creates." The clock in the hall struck noon, ringing in Christmas Eve. The air in the room, once so stale and hostile, now felt clean, purified by the truth. "Now," I said with a quiet smile I had been saving for months, "those who wish to stay for a Christmas based on honesty, respect, and real gratitude are welcome." Alejandro was the first to move. He walked over to me, took my hand, and looked me in the eye. "Mrs. Margaret, my family and I would be honored to stay if you would have us. We have much to talk about real family values." Valeria and the others who had stood by me nodded their agreement. Marco, the disappointed real estate agent, simply said, "I have to leave, but I want to apologize for my small role in her deception, Margaret. You have my respect." The verdict was rendered by action, not words. The truthful members of the family stayed. The deceitful one had to go. Tiffany, realizing her last shred of audience and support was gone, slowly rose from the sofa. She didn't look at me or Kevin. She simply picked up her handbag, a final gesture of self-preservation. She knew her manipulative game was over in this house. Kevin, however, remained rooted to the spot, his shoulders still slumped in shame. "Mom," he mumbled, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, Kevin," I replied softly. "You just have to choose." He didn't choose immediately, and I didn't push. I let the silence, the weight of his own conscience, be the final push. Tiffany walked out the front door without a word. Kevin watched her go, a long, agonizing look, before turning back to me, his eyes red but clear. The man who had been absent for 5 years had finally returned. I looked around my house. The Christmas lights twinkled faintly on the tree I had decorated years ago. The empty places at the table were no longer a sign of loss, but of necessary boundaries. The turmoil was gone. Robert, I told my lawyer, feeling a lightness in my chest. I hadn't known in decades, thank you. We're done here. Robert smiled. It was an honor, Margaret. Merry Christmas. Alejandro, Valeria, and I began the slow, careful process of opening up the china cabinet and bringing out the good plates, not for a display of wealth, but for a meal rooted in genuine, hard-earned respect. Those who prefer to continue living in fantasies and manipulations may leave, I had said. For the first time in 5 years, I was in total control of my house, my life, and my future, and I had never felt a freedom so absolute. And that was the end of the story, or rather the beginning of a new one. It took 5 long years, $50,000 worth of lies, and one disastrous Christmas Eve for me to finally understand the most important truth. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep others warm. I thought my value, my self-worth was tied to my utility, to how many pies I baked, or how clean my floors were. I confused servitude with love. But true honor, true family, is built on respect and defined boundaries. When I finally said, I am not your maid, I wasn't just quitting a chore. I was reclaiming my dignity and my right to exist as an individual, not as a convenience. The greatest gift I gave myself that Christmas was not the ocean view suite, but the absolute freedom of having control over my own life and my own legacy. Remember this: the price of peace is often the clear and firm enforcement of your boundaries. Don't wait for a lawyer or a grand betrayal to find your voice. Your life, your home, and your time are yours alone. This story about Margaret is heartbreakingly real for many people. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever had to draw a hard line to protect your finances or your self-respect from a loved one? Share your story. You are not alone. If this story resonated with you, if you felt that righteous indignation when Margaret was called dramatic, and you cheered for her, power reversal, please let us know. Press the number 1 inch the comments below to show your support for Margaret. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Auntie Tales for more powerful stories about family justice and emotional healing. We will be waiting for you in the next story.